word which came to Jeremiah from the Lord, saying, Arise, and go down to the potter's house. There I will cause thee to hear my words. And I went down to the potter's house, and behold, he wrought a work on the wheels. And the vessel that he made of clay was marred in the hands of the potter, so he made it again another vessel, as seemed good to the potter to make it. Then the word of the Lord came to me, saying, O house of Israel, cannot I do with you as this potter, saith the Lord? Behold, as the clay is in the potter's hand, so are ye in mine hand, O house of Israel. What vivid word pictures there are in the Bible. Why, for a minute, while reading that story about the potter, I thought I was actually in the potter's house. And I hope that you had the same impression while listening to me. Perhaps the reason I could visualize the details so easily is because recently I had the opportunity to visit a ceramics studio operated by some friends of mine. What I didn't know about ceramics would have overflowed the biggest piece of pottery ever made. I knew, of course, that pottery was an ancient craft, for the potter is often mentioned in Scripture. Indeed, when God would show his dominion over men and his irresistible power over their hearts, he has often had recourse to the parallel of the potter, who, of course, makes what he pleases with the clay. So, like Jeremiah the prophet, I too went down to the house of the potter. If he could learn a lesson or two, so could I. Bill and Doris were busy in their studio. What was once their hobby has now become their livelihood. Now they must produce in quantity the articles that were first created for no other reason than to satisfy their desire to make something useful and beautiful. I have the feeling, while talking with my friends, that even though they are surrounded by the lovely articles they are producing in quantity, their chief pleasure is still, like the true potter of all ages, to create the individual piece, something that reflects individual skill and the creative mood of the moment. I asked them how the potter's craft began, but they told me that no one really knew. Plenty of speculation, of course, but nothing positively authentic. Bill told me that pottery is commonly found among grain-eating peoples, so perhaps the family porridge was cooked in a hole in the ground, or in a container of skin, or wicker coated with clay. Then someone thought, why go to the bother of digging a hole or weaving a basket? Why not make a pot outside the hole, or without the basket? Doris thinks there may be real reason for this conjecture, seeing wicker pots coated with clay, dating from several centuries before Christ, have been found in excavations at Athens. I was there to learn. And what I learned, first of all, was that the clay is almost all-important. That the clay decides the pot has always been understood by the potter. The early potter didn't know why. He only knew that some clays were good for some things and no good for others. Clay, Doris informed me, is above everything else the product of time. There are many kinds of clay. The purest form, the last to be discovered, and a favorite of the European potter, is derived from granites that have decayed from the attacks of gases and vapors, but without movement. When the decomposition is almost complete, the product is called china clay. Another group of clays has been carried long or short distances by water. In other words, they are clays in which movement has played a part. The sediment spreads evenly over the water bottoms in varying depths. The erosion and the uplift of the water beds brings them within reach of men. But most clays are of recent origin. They are called common clays. All sorts of rocks, old and young, make their contribution to the common clays. They have been deposited at the bottom of lakes, at the mouths of rivers. Even glaciers have deposited their share of common clays. But the task of the potter is to know his clay, to learn how to use the clays made and placed at his disposal by nature. So, it seems, the clay decides the pot. And what decides the clay? Many things, evidently. Time and nature, movement, or the lack of it, gigantic forces like those of the glacier, or the quiet washing of the stream over the riverbed. It must surely be like that with the human material, the clay with which God has to work, varied in origin, background, and development, of all colors when it comes to thought and feeling, but each capable of being shaped into something useful and beautiful by the divine potter's hand. But back to the studio. Evidently, the clay has to go through still further conditioning processes. Where the clay comes from, of course, is interesting, but what happens to it afterwards is vital. In Bible days, the clay was kneaded by the feet of those who trod it into a workable condition. Today, the process is called wedging. The lump of clay is sliced on a wire and then vigorously slapped together. This is repeated again and again. The reason is, according to Bill, that all clay contains air, but the air must be driven out. If allowed to remain in the clay, the air will expand in the heat of firing and will cause the pottery to crack and burst. So the clay is prepared. All the impurities, such as twigs, leaves, roots, large stones, have been removed. The clay has been sieved, mixed with the water until it is properly plastic, then wedged, and all these processes precede the actual pottery making. They are all refinements that may not appear necessary, but the potter knows how greatly they will have a bearing on the beauty, the shape, and the durability of the finished product. My respect for the potter's craft was growing every minute, and my understanding of the prophet Jeremiah's story was increasing. No clay, natural or human, is satisfactory to the potter while there are impurities, while it is unyielding and unresponsive. I watched Bill storing the clay for future use. He told me that clay may be stored indefinitely, the longer the better. He said that the ancient Chinese potters took pride in storing the clay for the next generation to use. Without question, time adds its generous donation to the perfection of the potter's art. But next came the real rewards of my visit. Bill offered to make something that would be a memento of my visit to his studio. He had beside him some long rolls of clay. These he began to coil into shape. Between each layer, liquid clay called slip was added as an adhesive. Pottery was taking shape before my eyes, and by a technique called coiling, which is as old as the potter's craft itself. At the other side of the studio, Mrs. Potter was at work, not with coils, but with the wheel. Her sensitive hands were wrapped about a lump of wedged clay that seemed to be rising into a cone as it whirled around. I remembered the prophet Jeremiah's words. Then I went down to the potter's house, and behold, he wrought a work on the wheels. Only this time, the he was a she, but the wheel, and the responsive clay, and the skill of human hands were all there, and the Bible words seemed to have new meaning. Patience and practice are needed, Doris told me. The clay must be centered on the bat or base, so that the finished product will have balance and symmetry. While the wheel is turning, the clay must be worked several times, so that at the moment of shaping, it will respond sensitively to the potter's pressure. Now the clay mass is opened up. What was once only an inert lump of clay is suddenly a receptacle, a container, something useful, something beautiful. At this point, things happen swiftly, and the bowl appears. The whirling clay takes the shape that the potter wishes. The slightest pressure, and the contour changes. It came to me at that moment, while watching Doris at work, that today's antique was once someone's dream, brought to life by skillful and interested hands, just in the same way. Then came various refinements. As the bowl, now turned upside down, revolves on the wheel, tooling creates the foot upon which the finished article will rest. Outward appearance is almost the last consideration, but it is not forgotten. Potters have experimented for centuries with multitudes of glazes, always seeking for new and effective finishes. I watched my friend pouring the mixture over the clay, the mixture that would give the shining surface to the completed pottery. One process yet remained. The ware must be fired. Doris called this the point of no return. Once the pottery went into the kiln, it would be hardened permanently into its present shape. It may change slightly. It may shrink when fired, but its shape is irrevocably determined. Probably it was just at this point that the potter of Jeremiah's day found that the vessel he made had a flaw in it. Certainly he hadn't fired it, or he couldn't have made it again. The finished product, Bill declared, as he showed me some of his completed work. I must confess the phrase had new meaning for me. He showed me how the various chemicals in the clay and the glaze had reacted to the intense heat of the kiln. Each piece had its own beauty, its own distinctive shape or color, its individual usefulness. On this particular piece of pottery, I can see the potter's hallmark, and it is a very famous one. But Bill told me that the potter who created this piece was proud of his work, so satisfied with it that he wanted his name to be associated with it as long as the jar existed. The best pottery always bears a hallmark. Ancient Chinese potters often told the story of the thought behind the pottery in their mark. One famous ancient piece bears the legend, "Made for the pavilion for meditation, for the correction of faults." Thousands of such pottery hallmarks have been classified, indicating both the potter and the time of his work. So I went down to the house of the potter. Like Jeremiah, I had found it to be not only an education, but an experience. God is the divine potter. We are to be the clay, and he can only make something useful and beautiful of our lives when the impurities of sin and self are removed, when his grace makes us responsive to his will, as it shapes and molds our lives to that which is in the mind of God concerning us. And if the vessel is marred, thank God, he is able to make it again. It may be that someone will even now, just at this moment, hear the voice of God pleading, "Cannot I do with you as this potter?" If so, why not answer in words we sometimes sing, "Have thine own way, Lord, have thine own way, for thou art the potter, I am the clay. Mold me and make me after thy will, while I am waiting, yielded and still." And now, friends, once again, our three-word benediction, God bless you. Join us again, won't you, when we shall seek to learn more of the gospel and of him who is himself the living word. And they brought a blind man to Jesus, and Jesus asked him, "Do you see anything?" He said, "I see men, but they look like trees walking." Then Jesus laid his hands upon him again, and the man looked intently, and was restored and saw all things clearly. Hello, everybody. I'm glad we could get together again. I've just been reading and looking out of the window, enjoying my new glasses. I must confess the world looks a little different again since I've been tested and refitted. These are remarkable things, these glasses. Actually, I guess that many of the men referred to in the Bible as blind men had no poorer eyes than many of our friends today. But our friends have the benefit of fine glasses and all the technical skills we have developed to make weak eyes strong. How to help men see? Now, that has been a problem ever since the dawn of civilization. In ancient times, many diseases attacked the eyes. The fortunate escaped with eyes badly weakened, but the rest became blind. Men tried to devise helps for the weak eyes. Here, for example, in this book, is a photograph of a device used by a Chinese emperor 2,000 years before Christ. The lens was a precious stone, and while it tended to magnify, the area it covered was restricted, and it often distorted things. You ought to be glad that you don't have to use one of these, even if you could afford it. The progress we have made today from the crude gadget you've just seen to contact lenses, like this one, is really tremendous. Generally speaking, no one even knows you are wearing a little gadget like this, and yet they will give you practically perfect visual efficiency. Man is indeed an ingenious creature. I know how much I value my glasses and appreciate what they do for me. Without glasses, for example, that apple tree over there, it looks like this to me. I can see the tree, but its outline is fuzzy. If I didn't know, I probably couldn't say for certain that the tree was in bloom. But when I put my glasses on, now, see how different the tree looks. Quite a difference, isn't there? Man's ingenuity, his inventiveness, his intellectual capacity have produced many things designed to help us to see. Now, I have collected a few, and here they are on my desk. These are opera glasses. And binoculars. This is a telescope. And this, a microscope. Now, we all know about opera glasses. They approximately double the power of your eyes. As their name indicates, they were designed for a specific purpose. When these are used during an opera performance, they bring the singers and actors more sharply into view. Now, let's use these on the apple tree, just so that we can judge their power and effectiveness. Now, this is how the tree looks to me ordinarily. And this is what opera glasses do for my vision of the scene. Now, here is a pair of binoculars. Now, binoculars are much more powerful than opera glasses. Good ones have about 7 power lenses. That is, they impart to our eyes 7 times normal power. Now, let's try these on our favorite tree, just for purposes of comparison. Here again is the way I see the tree ordinarily. Now, this is what happens when I look at it through the binoculars. Now, there's rather an amazing transformation. It's easy to understand now, isn't it, why this particular help to sight is useful to the ranger. He can sight patrol thousands of acres of forest with a pair of binoculars, and we can imagine with such powerful glasses what they would mean to the sea captain searching the horizon for land and reefs and other ships. And speaking of the horizon, this now is the telescope, and it is the most powerful of all the instruments designed to bring distant objects into closer vision. The one we have here is about a 10-power glass, But there is almost no limit to the magnifying strength which can be built into a telescope. Astronomers use the telescope, and mammoth instruments like the one you now see are perched on the mountain tops of the world. These are so tremendous that power units must be built into them to make them maneuverable. Through their use has come new and startling knowledge of the heavens. But let's get back to our own small telescope, and let us have another look at our apple tree. Remember, this is how the tree looks ordinarily. And now let's look at it through the telescope. You see, it's so close that really, through this glass, I can only see a portion of the tree at a time. And I think you're beginning to get an idea of the relative strengths of the various aids to sight. This final object here is the microscope. Now, it is so powerful that it enables us to see things completely invisible to the naked eye, even when that eye has so-called perfect vision. It is the microscope that has allowed scientists to explore the tiny world of bacteria. By being able to see what was unseen, the research men in every field has made discoveries of vast benefit to mankind. It's highly probable that there never would have been a vaccine for polio if there had not been a microscope first. Now, we can't hold up the microscope and look at the tree across the way. It's much too powerful. We must concentrate the microscope on some tiny bit of the tree. And for that purpose, I have here a bit of bark from the tree which I passed this morning as I came in. Now, it's an ordinary thing, isn't it? And yet, you know, there's real beauty in the formation of bark. I have a minute piece of this bark already on the slide. Look at that. Did you ever see anything like it? Looks altogether different, doesn't it? Well, that is the bark of the tree through the microscope, seen as you never knew it to be. Yes, men are clever. They have built so many marvelous things to do what civilizations of the past would have called miracles. With modern techniques and skills, we have apparently managed to bring perfect sight to men in every set of circumstances. But have we done this really? Oh, I'm not questioning the quality of any of the instruments we've examined today, or of the glasses that I wear. The point is, man is a complex being, made in the likeness of God and possessing body and soul. Consequently, you don't see with your eyes alone. You see with your heart, with your soul too. I see men, said the man that Jesus was to cure, but they look like trees walking. You see, his vision was distorted, and so is that of many people today, distorted in a manner the finest glasses cannot correct. For these people, vision is impaired by an astigmatism of the spirit. They are trying to see through their sin, see through their prejudices and envy, through their lack of understanding and selfishness. Jeremiah the prophet helps us to understand this when he pleads, "O foolish people, you have eyes and see not, and ears that hear not. Your sins blind you to truth and cut off blessing." And somehow, I feel his words are timely in our day. It will take more than fine eyeglasses for the men seated around such a conference table as this to find a vision of fair play among the nations, to look with sympathetic understanding on all people, people who are different, and to see them as Jesus saw them, and to believe in salvation for the whosoever, or even to see in the beautiful apple tree its spiritual significance, a demonstration of God's creative power, of God's miracles of nature, and of his care for us. Spiritual blindness is a widespread malady. Thousands cannot see clearly without the same miracle that gave sight to the man in our test, the man who thought he saw trees walking. Christ's touch went deeper than the eyes of this blind man. That touch went down inside the man and awakened his desire to be one with Christ, to see things and people as they are, to know the truth. Jesus always does his part. He does it not only because of what he knows, but sometimes in spite of what he knows about us. All he requires to heal and to give that vision of soul which is eternal life is man's awareness of need and man's faith in the Christ to redeem and transform. Wherever there is a blind man to cry, "Have mercy upon me," there is the Christ to meet the need. It was when men in their blindness drew near to Jesus that he proved himself to be the light and life of men. I think of some lines, very, very appropriate, that read, "Lord, I was blind. I could not see in thy marred visage any grace. But now the beauty of thy face in radiant vision dawns on me. For thou hast made the blind to see, the deaf to hear, the dumb to speak, the dead to live. And lo, I break the chains of my captivity." And now to you and to everyone everywhere, the Salvation Army sends its three-word benediction. God bless you. We hope that you will join us again, when by God's help we will seek to learn more of the gospel and of him who is in very truth the living word. Yes, that's all it needs. A flick of the switch and we can see where we are and what we're doing. Yes, just a flick of a switch and immediately there's all the light we need. How seldom we stop to think about it. We enter a dark room, press a button, and think nothing of the miracle that floods the room with light. Do you remember the blackouts of war days? Some of us used to think that the darkness could almost be felt. But even then, there was the occasional light of a match, the shaded beams from the headlights of a passing jeep. True, they were only tiny, short-lived beams, but they were reminders of brighter days, of the past, and, we hoped, of the future. But I wonder what it must have been like when light was unknown, when only darkness existed. This we do know, that light was God's first gift, proving that man was not created for a world of utter darkness. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. From that moment until now, the natural light bestowed by God upon the world has not failed. It has been a continuing gift. Our first parents, it seems, were content to let the sun regulate their lives. They rose and retired with the sun. And to a large extent, even today, men live by that same division of time which we call day and night. But in this modern, fast-moving age of ours, man tries to extend his day and illuminate his night. Natural light has been supplemented by artificial light. Imagine trying to sell cars by candlelight, or lighting this window display with an oil lamp. Man has carried light into all sorts of odd places, into the barns of isolated farms, into the factories of the world where night can hardly be distinguished from day, into the pupil of the eye, and even into ovens and refrigerators. The possibility of light in darkness has always been with man, and that knowledge has always been in the mind of God. But it has taken man long centuries of painful search to learn the secret, and even now he doesn't know the complete story. But it's a fascinating story. Perhaps the first chapter was written when, for the first time, early man saw or made fire, a fearful and wonderful discovery. Did he see lightning from the heavens strike a tree, and the tree burst into flame? Or did he slowly learn how to make fire for himself? Once man knew that fire could be created, he wanted to capture it. Reeds and rushes became torches, or kindled the larger bonfires. But the torch had to be held, and this could be inconvenient. And a bonfire had a consuming appetite, and constant tending was a nuisance. Necessity and convenience were probably the parents of the first lamp. For as soon as the secret of feeding the flame was discovered, the lamp was born. Ancient Egyptians decided that the shell lamps in use were too crude for them. So they fashioned wicks made of fiber and set them inside stones that had been hollowed and filled with grease. Next came the lamps of learning, which the ancient Greeks and Romans made. This was a round or oval dish, quite shallow, of terracotta or metal. At one end was a handle, at the other a spout for a wick. Then the Greeks invented a word for it. Lampus, they said, meaning to shine. From this point until comparatively recent times, artificial light has been provided by a variety of lamps, each an improvement on its predecessor, but all relying on the captive flame to produce light. So the development went on. Candelabra became chandelier. Man was seeking more light, more and more light, never choosing to sit in darkness, physically, mentally, or spiritually, though often not moving as fast or as far as he might. In some parts of the world, progress was slower than others. The Shetland Islanders, for example, had their own peculiar method of making a lamp. They used to jam a wick down the throat of a fat, stormy petrel. And the North Pacific Coast Indians did the same, but with a plump little smelt called a candlefish. But container, wick, and fuel, they were the three components of the lamp for centuries. And whether whale oil or wax, the fact was always present that any lamp burns only so long as it has a fuel source. A classic example of this was the story told by Jesus. He described 10 young women who took lamps to meet the bridegroom and attend a wedding feast. Wedding customs of that day varied. In some areas, the bride would be escorted from the house of her father to the house of her husband. 10 poles would be carried before her. On the top of each would be a saucer of brass containing pieces of garments, oil, and pitch. These would be kindled and would provide the light for the wedding procession. Another custom was to wrap around the upper end of the poles rags which had been saturated in olive oil. Unless fed with fresh oil, these torches would burn down in less than a quarter of an hour. Perhaps the young women described by Jesus carried small earthenware lamps. Suffice it is to say, 5 took extra oil, and 5 didn't. The bridegroom's coming was delayed. The lamps of the 5 unprepared women had gone out from lack of fuel. For them there was no light, no feast, only what the Bible describes as outer darkness. The uncertain fuel supply was a problem from the time of the story told by Jesus until the 19th century. Then, suddenly, with the development of the mantle, lamps became brighter. Artificial light of a new kind went dancing across the world. But even this wonder was to be overshadowed, for on October 21st, 1879, Thomas Alva Edison gave the world the incandescent lamp. Did Edison suspect what he had done for mankind? I wonder. A glass bulb dangling at the end of a piece of green cord became in itself a world of light. Filament became a firmament of illumination. And now, a miraculous radiance flooded the homes of the world and illuminated its streets, flashed and blazed in a million windows. Signs spoke their messages in dazzling light and color. Electric bulbs appeared everywhere, glittering like a brilliant tiara crowning man's long search for more light. Yes, man has always sought for light, and lamps like this were especially coveted in Bible times. Homes were dark, so dark that even the poorest family tried to keep a lamp glowing through the night. It meant light, it meant comfort, it meant safety. No wonder then that King David assured Jehovah, "Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path." "Thou art my lamp" has long been a fervent salute to the Almighty. In the earliest Hebrew temple life, an olive oil lamp burned constantly outside the veil of the tabernacle, for the lamp has always been a symbol of the good and godly. The significance is apparent when one of Job's comforters makes the statement, "Yea, the light of the wicked shall be put out, and the spark of his fire shall not shine. The light shall be dark in his tabernacle, and his candle shall be put out with him." Could you begin to number the many kinds of lamps that exist today? Traffic lights, keeping the long lines of traffic floating through the great cities of the world, or at least attempting to do so. Giant searchlights, whose fingers of light poke the night skies, plucking out of the darkness the passing plane, or perhaps just making the gala event still more impressive. Headlights that bathe the highway in light so that journeys can be made safely and speedily through the night as well as the day. Storm lights that provide a ray of hope for those in distress. Lights by which the surgeon can work, bringing life into the world or helping to restore health. Such a variety of lamps and lights. Kerosene, gasoline, diffused, direct, indirect, incandescent, fluorescent, neon, some small, some large, all different, but all important. All different, I said, as varied as the men and women of whom Jesus spoke when he said, "Ye are the light of the world." You see, God intended that each man's life should shine, dispensing brightness and always dispelling darkness, leading other men into safety and peace. For the light of the lamp is just that. It is both illumination and communication. Can I make this clear to you? Before this vessel has sailed many more knots, it will be surrounded by night as well as storm. Then, as it approaches another vessel or comes near harbor, the signal light will flash, just as you see it doing now. Perhaps you can't read the code, but actually, while you've watched, the light has signaled the title of our series, The Living Word. Now, in the distance, the answer is flashed back. Message received. Message understood. Jesus said, "I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have the light of life." Or as the poet has said, "A light came out of darkness, no light. No hope had we till Jesus came from heaven, our light and hope to be." The purpose of his coming to men was to win them from darkness, to make their way plain and bright, shining more and more unto the perfect day. In him was light, and the life was the light of men, and the light shineth in darkness. That light, which is the true light, has never ceased shining. Through the long night of man's sin, through the shades of persecution and conflict, it shines steadily, illuminating the way, communicating the message of life and of love. Does your life respond? Does your heart answer to the radiance of God's love as it beams fall upon you? I hope you are able to testify that the darkness of sin has been replaced in your life by the light of God's presence and power. I hope you can say, "Message received, message understood." I heard the voice of Jesus say, "I am this dark world's light. Look unto me, thy morn shall rise, and all thy day be bright." I looked to Jesus, and I found in him my star, my sun, and in that light of life I'll walk, till traveling days are done. Let me just conclude by reading to you some words of the Apostle Paul. But if our gospel be hid, it is hid to them that are lost, in whom the God of this world hath blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them. For we preach not ourselves, but Christ Jesus the Lord, and ourselves your servants, for Jesus' sake. For God, who commanded the light to shine out of darkness, hath shined in our hearts, to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. And now, to everyone everywhere, our three-word benediction. God bless you. Don't forget, join us again when we will seek to learn more of the message and of the meaning of the living word. Oh, hello there. Say, here is a book literally packed with interest and challenging adventure. Have you read it? It is the thrilling account of a daring conquest of the highest peak in the Himalayan mountains, Mount Everest. What is it about mountains that is so universally enthralling? Is it the majestic scenery that holds our attention? Or perhaps the challenge to conquest that we feel as we gaze at the heights? Or the fact that mountains, more than any other physical thing, make us sensitive to our littleness in the face of the eternal? I think of the psalmist's words, I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills. From whence cometh my help? My help cometh from the Lord. I think that I shall always be in love with the mountains. There comes to my recollection the memory of my first trip through the Rockies. We drove in the early morning hours for seemingly unending miles across the flat, colorless plains, when suddenly there appeared on the edge of the horizon what looked like a low purple cloud. Then as we drove westward, the purple cloud rose higher into the heavens and gave way to a score of snow-capped peaks, glistening in the reflected light of the sun. Before me was the Rockies. What a thrilling sight. My heart was gripped with a sense of awe and wonder. And then, as the miles stretched out as ribbons under the wheels of the car, the multicolored slopes of the mountains became visible, and an overpowering sense of the majesty and omnipotence of God possessed me. Later on, we stopped in a valley bounded by towering peaks. I stood and gasped at the sheer beauty about me. My thoughts turned to the mountains of the Bible, so linked with the revelation of the mind of God and of his will for men. I thought of Sinai, that hill of red granite rock upon which Moses received the oracles of God, and where began what we know of organized religion. Of that ridge of Jura limestone rising 2,000 feet above the blue Mediterranean called Carmel, one of the beauty spots of the East, but remembered by Christians for Elijah's faith and for the dramatic vindication of a living God who answered prayer. I thought of a little hill little as mountains go, the horns of Hattin, the mount upon which Christ taught the greatest truths that men can know. We speak of these words today as the Sermon on the Mount. And then I thought of Golgotha, the Everest of the mountains of the Spirit. For Mount Calvary, which is its more familiar name, towers above time and space, and the cross on its summit can be seen in every land, by every people, in every age. I wonder what thoughts come to your mind as you think of the mountains? Just to gaze upon their beauty, and in imagination to breathe that pine-scented mountain air may turn your thoughts to travel. Perhaps you envisage a narrow, winding trail etched up the mountainside by the hooves of burros and the feet of old prospectors as they made new trails in their search for the tiny gold nuggets they penned from a mountain stream. Or, in your imagination, you might hear the ringing sound of pick against the rock as they search for a sign of precious ore. It could be that your mind's fancy turns to the snow-covered Alps in Switzerland, where thousands of people go to participate in winter sports. Or if you're the hardy type, you might picture yourself climbing the vertical rocky wall of the Matterhorn. And what a mountain that is, standing mantled in snow and soaring 14,780 feet into the heavens. Not until 1865 was this pyramid conquered. Then, Edward Whymper's party of 4 Englishmen and 3 Swiss reached its top. But in the descent, 4 were killed. Yet, every summer, scores of visitors still make the climb. Sometimes I travel as I glance at illustrated travel folders, such as these. Here is one where we can stand on the porch of a ranger station and with binoculars watch the flock of Rocky Mountain sheep high above the timber line in a meadow. From a mountain path, we can spot mountain goats leaping from crag to crag 1,000 feet above you. As someone has put it, peace seems to flow around you. If you have a liking for history, you might call to mind the mighty Andes Mountains in Peru, where the warlike Incas sustained their independence in a mountain retreat for nearly 40 years after Cusco fell to Spain. Here the Incas possessed a fortress defended by some of nature's most impregnable ramparts. The road to their kingdom crossed passes 15,000 feet high and canyons 5,000 feet deep. In another part of the world, the Japanese say that there are 2 kinds of fools: those who have never climbed Fuji and those who have climbed it twice. Everyone who views the sacred mountain from far away as Tokyo remembers that this old man mountain isn't as innocent as he looks, but that often he blows his top in volcanic eruption of death and destruction. In Iran, twice each year, the nomadic Bakhtiari scale the snow-clad Zagros mountains to find grass for their flocks. Plateau snow and valley drought dictate these migrations, and everyone from babies to lame old men make the dangerous journey. Even in the Antarctica, steam and gases pour from the snowy cone of fiery Mount Erebus, which towers to an altitude of 13,200 feet and dominates the entire area. Yet, for height and dominant majesty, we must turn to the mountain of our story, Mount Everest. It is so tall that no one was able to climb to the top until Hillary and his guide reached it in 1953. This mountain is more than 29,000 feet high, or about 5.5 miles. Interestingly enough, some scientists think that it is still rising. They reckon that the Earth's crust is still moving and forming mountains in that part of the world. Some mountains call to mind some of the achievements made possible by man's ingenuity and toil. For example, I traveled recently over the Smoky Mountains in Virginia and landed by airplane on the top of 3 of them. Engineers had leveled landing fields as flat as a tabletop. Think of the world's largest reflector telescope atop Mount Palomar, of transportations tunneling through mountains, bridging canyons and passes, of a steel television tower piercing the sky above the peak of a California mountain, increasing the range of its power. All of these are symbols of man's progress on the road of civilization. But what of life? The Bible directs us to think of mountains, which, though not literal or geographical, are nonetheless real in human and spiritual experience. True experience is not experience of the plains only. This is what makes life interesting. This is that which presents challenge and which demands our best. As the mountains relieve the monotony of the plains, so challenge brings zest and the hope of accomplishment to our daily living. Mountains appear to everyone somewhere along life's pathway. Sometimes they are mountains of sorrow and disappointment. They may be mountains of temptation or of fear. They may be mountains of opportunity, or they may just appear as obstacles. However they appear to us, all present a challenge. The question is, how do you react to their challenge? Accepting the challenge and climbing the mountain brings victory, and once you reach its peak, you will have found the place of increased vision, where all of life's problems seem to level out before you. Many a man who has accepted the challenge of climbing life's mountains has found himself unable to cope with its rocky, barren walls, and relying on his own strength has fallen to defeat. What we are prone to forget is that the conquest of any mountain demands not only the acceptance of the challenge it presents, but the laying hold of the resources, supplies, and knowledge of others, and more than all else, laying hold of eternal life in Christ. I never think of Mount Olivet without associating it with Jesus and his personal victory over loneliness. The last words of chapter 7 of St. John's Gospel reads, "And every man went to his own house." The first words of chapter 8 ought not to be separated from them. They are definitely linked and so full of rich meaning. Think of them together. And every man went to his own house. But Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. The connection is startling, for Jesus never lived a morbid life. He spent the days of his ministry amid the crowds of men. He loved the open air, the popular bazaars and busy market squares, and the hillside by the lake where crowds would gather were his sanctuary. But when the sun went down and others went home, Jesus would make his way to a hilly place apart, and there in solitude he would pray. Was it of this that Bishop Bickersteth thought when he penned the words, "Come ye yourselves apart and rest a while? Weary, I know it, of the press and throng. Wipe from your brow the sweat and dust of toil, and in my quiet strength again be strong." So it is that the conquering of any spiritual mountain along life's pathway demands a dependence upon the wisdom and strength and the resources of one greater than ourselves. Without Christ in our lives, the challenge of the mountains, whether we accept it or not, can bring only despair and defeat. On another occasion, Jesus emphasized this when he said, "If ye have faith as a grain of mustard seed, ye shall say unto this mountain, remove from hence to yonder place, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible unto you." Is it this which the apostle thought when he testified in Philippians 4 and 13, "For I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me"? Got any rivers you think are uncrossable? Got any mountains you can't tunnel through? God specializes in things thought impossible, and he can do what no other power can do. And now, friends, to you and to everyone everywhere, the Salvation Army sends its three-word benediction, God bless you. We hope that you will join us again when, by God's help, we will seek to learn more of the gospel and of him who is in very truth the living word.
welcome again to another episode of The Living Word. Our theme, the greatest thing in the world, as Henry Drummond once described it. But first, as a martial introduction, the Salvation Army Band plays some stirring music entitled Silver Star. With the title Silver Star, I suppose it would only be right to call that sparkling music. But we turn now from the brilliance of brass to the beauty of blended voices. The girls' trio singing, "Oh, How I Love the Savior's Name."
There is